So the nominees for the 2024 Game Awards have officially been unveiled, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth nabs 7 nominations. But does it even matter? Okay, this is going to be a doozy of a video. We're going to take a look at the nominations that Rebirth nabbed, give my own thoughts and opinions on it, as well as some of my predictions of what I hope to see at this event. This video is going to be a video, so if any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, and if you're new here and you'd like to stick around and help support the channel, you can subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to have a lot of thoughts on this year's award show. So Jeff Keighley has officially unveiled the nominees for this year's Game Awards, and it's kind of a weird one. The Keigleys are always kind of unpredictable. You never know what's going to get nominated. They happen to make a pretty controversial rule change this year, which we will get to a little bit later, that I'm not the biggest fan of, and a lot of people aren't as well. So it's going to be kind of weird discussing this video, but before we get into the nominations, every year I like to give my own personal hopes and dreams, my predictions of what I hope to see pop up at the Game Awards this year in terms of shadow drops and big reveals. And I would also encourage all of you guys to do the same thing in the comments down below. Give me a list of like your top 5 world premieres and reveals that you're hoping to see at this year's event. The first one. This one's probably not going to happen, but a port for Final Fantasy 16. It really feels like we should have gotten an announcement by now that 16 has made its way to the Xbox, or is making its way to the Xbox. We do know that Yoshi P and CS3, not CBU3, are working on an Xbox version, or at least want to try and get an Xbox version out. So you'd think that would be announced by now. So maybe at the Game Awards, that could be maybe not necessarily a shadow drop, but let people know like, hey, yeah, the Xbox version of 16 is in fact coming. And to go hand in hand with that, it'd be really cool to see 16 get a PS5 Pro enhancement patch. 16 is a beautiful game, but it has some issues with its performance mode where things just look kind of blurry and muddy, kind of like Rebirth did, and there are some areas where the frames just completely tank. So to see a Pro enhanced version of that game running in 4K at 60 consistently, I think would be gorgeous, and I'd really love to see that. Next, for any fighting game fans out there, a look at the new Virtua Fighter. So last year, Sega teased a pretty big announcement, and the announcement ended up being that they are remaking a number of their beloved games. And they also, prior to that, had some teases for Virtua Fighter. And in a recent interview with VGC, the transmedia boss over at Sega, Justin Scarpone, literally just said, yeah, we are working on a new Virtua Fighter, as well as games like Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio, Streets of Rage, Shinobi. But then he just ends with, Virtua Fighter is being developed. So I love fighting games. I really love VF. VF is the granddaddy, the father essentially of 3D fighting games. And you don't have 3D fighting games nowadays without Virtua Fighter. And my favorite 3D fighting game is Tekken. You don't have Tekken without VF. Tekken unabashedly ripped off Virtua Fighter for so many years before it eventually kind of became its own thing. So I'm hopeful that something Virtua Fighter related will show up at this event, maybe a trailer announcing a brand new Virtua Fighter since there is one in development. And I'm really curious to see what the VF team does to bring Virtua Fighter into the modern era of fighting games, because it's been a while since we've gotten a brand new Virtua Fighter. The last Virtua Fighter that came out was the re-release of VF5 on PlayStation 4 and 5. That was incredibly fun. And although Sega didn't give exact sales numbers, they did allude to that game having around 8 million downloads. So there clearly is a craving for a Virtua Fighter. And to see what they do with the mechanics is very interesting, because VF has always been the pure fighting game. Pure martial arts, wrestling, whatever the style is. There's no crazy supers and ultras and Hadoukens and dragon punches. It's not like KI where someone gets hit with something and you just hear ultra really loud. That's not VF. So I'd be curious to see if they make any changes, like maybe they decide to add a super or some sort of special attack. Or do they just keep it pure VF? Next, speaking of fighting games, Tekken 8 guest character reveal, Tifa, baby. I'm huffing that copium super hard this morning. Tifa's not going to make it into Tekken 8, at least not yet. But I really am never going to give up that hope of seeing Tifa join the Tekken 8 roster. Come on, Harada, Square Enix, there's got to be some sort of partnership there that forms eventually for Tekken 8 to get Tifa into that game. But just seeing a guest character reveal in particular for that game would be cool. It's probably going to end up being an original Tekken character that was in previous games. I think there actually may have been a leak in regards to who it is, so Tifa won't be there, but a boy can dream, man. Let me have this. And lastly, another one of my favorite franchises, Resident Evil. I'm hoping to see a reveal for Resident Evil 9 at this event. There's been so many crazy leaks coming out for Resident Evil 9 recently that I refuse to cover because I don't want to spoil anything for myself, and I would much rather hear directly from Capcom in regards to what's happening with this franchise. But earlier in the summer, you had people going back and forth of like, Resident Evil 9 is going to have Chris as the lead, and then someone's like, no, it's actually going to be Leon, and then someone says, no, Leon's only in the intro of the game, and then it's going to be a different character, it's going to be open world, and all this stuff going back and forth that just ended up being BS that someone threw, hoping it would stick to the wall. So I think there's a good chance that RE9 will show up at this award show with a brand new trailer to reveal what the heck is going to happen in RE9. So I'm very excited to see that, and I'll cover anything Resident Evil related here on the channel. That is official anyway. All right, so the nominees. I had an entire spiel written down days prior to the reveals of the nominees, explaining like how the Game Awards works, how voting works, how there's a voting body that's, makes up 90% of the votes, and then 10% is fan voted, and a lot of it really comes down to Metacritic score, not really sales and popularity. All that just got thrown out the window a couple of days ago because of the announcement that they made a rule change to the Game Awards where they are now going to allow DLC and expansions as well as remasters and remakes to be eligible for not only every category at the awards show, but Game of the Year specifically. Now, remakes I have no issue with. A lot of remakes these days are pretty different from their original counterparts. Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, for example, while they still have the spirit and story of the original game, they do deviate quite a bit. And if you sit down and play OG FF7, that combat system is so different from what we get in the remake trilogy. So I'm totally fine with something like that being nominated. Another example is the Resident Evil remakes. RE2 and RE4 have the spirit of the original Resident Evil games, but they offer completely different experiences when you sit down and actually play them. So I'm cool with remakes being eligible for these types of awards. Remasters, not so much. Quality of life changes, better graphics are great, but it's still the same original game. Now, DLC and expansions. I'm not a big fan of that being added to Game of the Year in particular, and honestly I really feel like DLC and expansions should have their own category because that just kind of makes sense. It feels really weird to have a game come out one year and then 1 or 2 years later they release an expansion for it, and then that becomes eligible for Game of the Year when there's a bunch of new titles that just came out. That really feels kind of wrong to me. And I'm not just saying that because Rebirth is nominated for Game of the Year and I would love to see it win. I've always felt this way, and I would say it regardless of what the nominations were. That would be like me advocating for Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermissions DLC to be nominated for Game of the Year. Is it a great DLC? Abso-frickin-lutely. Should it be nominated for Game of the Year? No, because it's not a new game. It's building off of a pre-existing game, expanding 7 Remake in particular, so it shouldn't be eligible. So this is a really weird category change. I don't really quite understand why they did it. I think I kind of do. Let's be honest here. It's Elden Ring. The gaming industry loves Elden Ring. The people that vote on these awards is a voting body, kind of similar to the Academy Awards for the Oscars. It's filled with tons of game journalists from all across the world, and there's a bit of a hive mind there when it comes to this stuff. And these game journalists absolutely love FromSoft. I'm pretty sure most of them would give up their firstborn at the first opportunity to play the next FromSoft game. That's how much they love FromSoft. So basically any category that Elden Ring is nominated in, and it's a lot, it's probably going to win. But we'll get a little bit more into that later into the Game of the Year discussion, because it's just such a weird thing to do, especially last minute. But the first category we are going to start off with kind of shook me a little bit, I'll be honest. and it is best performance. Now, what I will say is a lot of people don't really take the Game Awards very seriously. There's a lot of issues with categories and nominations, which I completely understand. But if there is a category that I think should have some sort of reverence and respect levied at it, I think it's this category, and that is best performance. The people who portray these characters give it their all. They do the best they possibly can with the material they're given, and they really perform their butts off for these characters to stay true to the source material, to the developers, and to the fans. So we start off first with the first nominee in this category, Brianna White for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Congrats, Brianna. I loved her portrayal as Aerith. I'll focus a little bit more on that in a minute. The next is Hannah Tell for Life is Strange Double Exposure. Umberly Gonzalez for Star Wars Outlaw. Seeing a Latina nominated, that's pretty cool. I didn't play Star Wars Outlaw. I've been Star Warsed out for a very long time, but that's pretty cool. Luke Roberts for Silent Hill 2, which I have a lot to say on that guy's performance. And Melina, is it Jurgens? Apologies, for Senua Saga Hellblade 2. So out of all these games, the only ones I played are Rebirth and Silent Hill 2. But I have experience with the first Hellblade. I thought Melina was spectacular in that game, and she was not a voice actor. She was just somebody on the dev team that they needed as a stand-in for the face model and face capture, and she ended up becoming Senua, and she does a brilliant job in that game of performing as this character who is struggling with so many mental health issues. But I haven't played Hellblade 2, so I can't comment on her performance in that game, but I'm sure she does great. The two that I can't speak on are obviously Brianna and Luke Roberts. I'll start first with Luke Roberts. Silent Hill 2 Remake was the first Silent Hill I've ever played. I was always aware of the franchise, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, I was always a Resident Evil kid growing up. You know, mansion, zombies, the cheesy, hokey, hammy kind of line delivery. I was a Resident Evil kid, but I was always aware of Silent Hill, and I knew it to be that cerebral, slower-paced, psychological horror franchise that a lot of people really loved. And I missed out on the OG Silent Hill 2 when it first came out. So when Remake came out, I didn't really have any plans to play it, but then once the reviews started coming out and I heard so many great things about it, I'm like, you know what? I really genuinely want to play this game. I had this strong urge to play it over something like Metaphor, so I played Silent Hill 2, and it is phenomenal. And speaking of the performance of Luke Roberts as James, he just knocks it out of the goddamn park with his performance. Portraying this man who has lost his wife, who is almost kind of aloof at times, is super depressed and sad, but also has these moments where, you know, the anger just kind of peeks through because of something someone said to him. And Silent Hill 2 in general has a lot of really great performances from its cast, but Luke in particular just, I think, absolutely nails that kind of almost monotone at times level of delivery where, you know, for anyone who struggled with mental health, like, you know, I have in particular, you just have those days where you just feel like a zombie and speaking is difficult and your speech patterns are kind of different. Luke Roberts absolutely nails all of that stuff. And the one scene I would urge you all to check out just to see how incredible his performance is go to YouTube, type in Silent Hill 2 Remake Stillness ending. Watch that ending and watch how brilliant that man's performance is in that role. I can't go too in depth with the story and what happens because I don't want to spoil it for anyone, because like me, there's probably a lot of people that didn't even play the OG Silent Hill 2 and aren't familiar with the story. But seeing his performance is incredible. And what I love so much about it is that the face capture does not betray his performance. You see every ounce of what that performance is in his face, from his eyes welling up with tears, from him fighting back those tears with the way that his mouth and jaw are moving, the quiver in his voice, that shakiness of him feeling so broken and guilty. It's beautiful, it's heartbreaking, and he just nails it. He's phenomenal in this game. He also has some of the best attack battle sounds I think I've heard in a survival horror game. This guy gives it his all. Now on the Final Fantasy front, I'll be honest, I was a bit shook. I was fully expecting Cody Christian, who is the voice of Cloud Strife, to be nominated in this category, and he's nowhere to be found. So I feel like you could maybe call that a bit of a snub, because I think Cody is brilliant as Cloud Strife. The nuance that his character requires in Rebirth in particular, of being this badass ex-soldier who's kind of an asshole, but also has these moments where he's a bit more open and soft, also a little bit goofy. And then there's the younger portrayal of Cloud in Nibelheim, where Cody changes his voice, he changes his line delivery, and it's completely different from modern day Cloud. And there are reasons for that in terms of the story. And when you watch an interview with Cody, he so clearly not only loves this character, understands this character to his core. He knows that Cloud is really just a silly goofball deep down. And I thought his performance in Rebirth definitely warranted a nomination this year, but unfortunately that didn't happen. He did, however, get nominated for the Golden Joystick, so maybe there's a chance he'll win that one. But Brianna White is our nominee. And I know some people out there might be kind of, not crazy about that nomination, but I think Brianna does a wonderful job. And the thing that makes her performance even better in Rebirth is when you consider the fact that she's never voice acted before. If I'm not mistaken, Remake was her first voice acting job, and she knocks it out of the park, man. Seeing her evolution from Remake to Crisis Core to Rebirth, you hear the experience in her voice. And much like Cody, she has to give a nuanced performance because at any given time, she is portraying a different version of Aerith. We're not always aware of what that version of Aerith is, but you can kind of hear the subtle differences in how she approaches her line delivery. And I really, like a lot of other characters, she fully embodies that spirit of Aerith, being this girl who was kind of shy at first, but is really just loves life and is really spunky and spontaneous and just really appreciates the fact that she is living on this planet and just loves to have fun. And then she has those more serious moments where she's clearly very intelligent and has been through so much. And I think Brianna just nails that performance. I think it's a well-deserved nomination. Now, what I will say, there are incredible actors in the World of 7 Remix trilogy. I really feel like you could say any one of these cast members is an unsung hero for this game. John Eric Bentley, I think you can make the argument that man picks up 7 Remix trilogy, puts it on his back, and just takes off. His performance as Barrett in Remake and Rebirth is phenomenal. And again, all of these actors are so nuanced because the game requires so much from these characters at any given time, whether it's an incredibly heartbreaking moment where his best friend and his wife have just died in his arms, or he's joking with Cloud about how his daughter's gonna grow up one day and leave the house, and it kills him. It's a brilliant performance. Susie Young, who also has to balance that young, obnoxious teenager with moments of being hit with reality, being hit with the fact that her country is probably going to be invaded and that her people are dying. That is heavy stuff. But my personal unsung hero, and if you've watched previous videos, I've primed you guys for this, it is Britt Baron, who plays Tifa. Britt absolutely embodies every aspect of Tifa from head to toe. The softness, the conflict, the strength, and to see her evolution from Remake to Rebirth, where she finally lets go of that people-pleasing attitude and realizes she doesn't have to have everyone like her. She doesn't have to apologize for things that aren't her fault. I think she nails in that voice delivery, her voice in particular. It's got like a little raspiness to it at times. It's a little husky at times, but like I love Britt's portrayal of Tifa. And there's one moment in particular I have to shout out in Britt's performance where I think she absolutely kills it. And it's not even a line delivery. They're battle sounds. In the final battle with Jenova, when everyone's getting their hits in that really big spectacular cutscene, there's a moment where Jenova hits Cloud with ice and it pushes him away. Tifa comes swooping in, slides down that ice, and lands a 4-hit combo on Jenova. And in those 4 hits, Britt perfectly articulates the anger, the frustration, the sadness, and heart that Tifa has. And she does that with battle sounds, man. It's not even a line delivery. That is how good someone like Britt Baron is, that she can convey all of those emotions with battle sounds. It's one of my favorite moments in that game, and I feel like some people could overlook it, but hearing that come out of her, I'm like, oh my God, Tifa's going through it right now, man. So any one of these people in the cast, I feel like, is an unsung hero that could have been easily nominated. And for me, it really comes down to Brianna and Luke. And it's really hard to compare because both games require so much that's different from their performances. So trying to pick who I feel is the best performance is really difficult, but I think I would probably give the edge to Brianna because, again, she has to portray different versions of Aerith, and she's new at this, and I think she's nailing it. Up next is Best Score and Music. We've got Astrobot, Rebirth, Metaphor, Silent Hill 2, and Stellar Blade, or as I like to call it, Stellar Blade. This one could be a toss-up for a lot of people. Astrobot has a brilliant, fun, funky soundtrack that matches the environments of each level. Silent Hill 2 will depress the fuck out of you, man. I was so bummed out playing Silent Hill 2 while also being scared because of that music. It just so perfectly exemplifies the atmosphere of Silent Hill 2, that fog, that dense anxiety that James and the player are feeling, that everyone in that town is feeling. Metaphor, I did not play, but I know people love that soundtrack. That battle theme with that monk going crazy in the background, it's insane. Stellar Blade, gotta be honest, don't really remember much of the music from what I heard from that game, but Rebirth is my choice. 400 plus tracks in this game, and I don't think there's a bad one in this bunch. From the battle themes, to the region themes, to the boss battle themes, to one of the best themes in the game, Fight for Us Stamp, the best piece of Shinra propaganda you will ever hear in your life. That song is a complete rush of dopamine and serotonin. It gets the blood pumping. It's so happy and vibrant, and I love the damn song so much. I made a combat montage set to this song. Future Corduroy, play that damn montage. I'm sorry. I think I blacked out for a second there. But I don't understand how someone can hear that song and be like, it's okay. But Rebirth in general just has a fantastic soundtrack, man. What they're able to do, those composers are so talented. There's the song that plays too when you fight the summons. And I remember hearing that song and thinking to myself, like, this has a Final Fantasy 16 vibe. And what I would learn afterwards is that one of the arrangers and composers on 16 actually arranged that battle song. So he didn't compose the song, but it has that flow of a Final Fantasy 16 song. There's Genova's battle theme, which starts off with this beautiful rendition of Aerith's theme that is slowly getting eaten away at as you're battling Genova until it's completely swallowed up by the Genova theme. I love the music in this game. I wanted to really do a video focusing on the music, but unfortunately the copyright situation with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's music is so up in the air that any one song can trigger a copyright, and I can't really risk that on my channel. So I won't be able to do that, unfortunately, but the music in this game is just splendiferous. I love it. Also, there's the main theme that they turned into a battle theme, and again, like, there's region music, and then the region music has a battle version of it all. The character thing, it's incredible. Rebirth is my pick. I can't go on a tangent anymore. I fucking love this soundtrack. I know I'm swearing a lot. I just had an energy drink and I just worked out. Bear with me. Up next is Best Audio Design. We've got Astrobot, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Rebirth, Hellblade 2, and Silent Hill 2. So Astrobot also has some really good audio design. All of the sounds that come out of that DualSense controller are super cool, and just maneuvering around that environment, hearing all the clicks and the bleeps and the bloops and the different sounds from each surface you're running on in Astrobot, super satisfying. Silent Hill 2 has some of the best audio design I think I've had ever experienced in a survival horror game. When you walk into a dilapidated, nasty looking hospital room and someone starts whispering in your ear, it will freak anyone out. The sound of entering a hallway and you can hear a nurse just kind of scooting around the environment, and you're having to try and pinpoint where this nurse is at because it's so dark you can't see anything. It's brilliant. Again, I haven't played Hellblade 2, but the first Hellblade had some fantastic audio design, and if you ever decide to play that game, wear a pair of headphones. The binaural audio in that game is so well done. Call of Duty to me is just Call of Duty. I know it's hard to capture like all of the accurate sounds of those weapons, but they seem to do it every year. It's almost kind of like a machine at this point. They just know what they're doing. And then Rebirth has some brilliant audio design. Everything in Rebirth has some sort of audio cue or special effect that just satisfies my brain so much. When you stagger an enemy in that game, the sound that plays scratches that itch in my brain. when you go into Punisher mode with Cloud and he counters an enemy, that sound that plays scratches an itch in my brain. The sound that spells make, that abilities make, the limits make, the summons make, the little cute chocobo chickens, man. It's just, this one for me, I think it goes to Rebirth. Hands down, gotta go to Rebirth. Up next, this one might be a bit controversial. This is Best Narrative. We have Rebirth, Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, Metaphor, Hellblade 2, and Silent Hill 2. Now for me, I like the story of Rebirth. I love the narrative. Fans are split. A lot of people don't like the ending. They feel like it was very messy, which it is, but it's kind of hard to judge the narrative of Rebirth when we don't have a full, complete trilogy. So Part 3 has to come out, it has to nail the landing, and then I think we can kind of look back at Rebirth and re-observe that game's ending to see how it really impacts the franchise. But for me, I think I would pick Best Narrative to be Silent Hill 2. That is such an incredibly powerful, depressing, sad story for every character involved. What James goes through losing his wife, and again, there's a big twist that happens in that game. A character like Angela, who might be one of the most heartbreaking characters I think I've seen in a video game. A character that is so innocent, but gets so much awful abuse from specific family members, and the way that she envisions Silent Hill as a world on fire compared to James, how everything is really kind of dark and dank and sickly, which kind of represents what his world became when his wife got sick. And then you've got a character like Eddie, who is socially isolated. Everything in Eddie's world is cold and frozen like a meat locker. And just navigating that game and learning about the story. And once that twist hits, the game really makes the player marinate in what just happened. You're in this dilapidated hotel that's falling apart. You're trying to make your way out. And the whole design of the area, the look of the area, the music that plays really makes you feel terrible about what you just learned about this character in the world. They do such a great job with that game's narrative, and then there's so much symbolism and depth to this game's narrative that I'm still learning about the psychology of these characters and what they're going through and what, everything represents, from how I, mentioned before, how each character views the town of Silent Hill to what draws them to Silent Hill to even the clothes that they're wearing. There is so much depth and so many layers to this game and its characters that Best Narrative for me goes to Silent Hill 2. If you haven't played Silent Hill 2 because you were on the fence, because it's Konami and they don't exactly have the greatest will with gamers, and Bloober Team hasn't really delivered a fantastic game yet, you can take those fears and throw them into a garbage disposal. Silent Hill 2 is fantastic. Next, we have Best RPG. We've got Dragon's Dogma 2, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, which is DLC, Rebirth, Like a Dragon, and Metaphor. So initially I thought, this category is probably going to be a toss-up between Rebirth and Metaphor. It's not looking likely anymore. Now that Elden Ring is eligible for every category, I assume it's going to win every category that it's in. So I personally would give Best RPG to Rebirth. I know it can kind of, again, be a toss-up for a lot of people between Rebirth and Metaphor. And even, Yakuza Like a Dragon has done so well for that series and so many people love it. Dragon's Dogma 2, I think, is a little bit polarizing, but for me, the only one that I've played is Rebirth. So that, that gets my reward for Best RPG. It's a really great blend of action and RPG in that game. And all of the RPG mechanics, whether it's side quests or like the turn-based ATB command-based menu system, I think is so well done. So Rebirth gets my vote there. Next is Best Game Direction, which is like overall, like the best game in terms of like overall design, gameplay. Everything that you factor into what makes a great game is technically game direction. So we've got Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, or as I affectionately like to call it, Black Myth Wu-Tang. Wu-Tang is for the children after all. Elden Ring, Rebirth, and Metaphor. We already know what's going to win. It's going to be Elden Ring. But for me, best game direction overall is Rebirth. Everything that goes into making a fantastic game, I think Rebirth absolutely nails and excels at. From combat to the narrative, to the audio design, to the music, to exploration, to the writing, to the performances. This to me for me is Rebirth, hands down. And I feel like even if you stripped out the nostalgia, I would probably still feel that way, because these are some great characters regardless of whether or not you're familiar with them. The game is a joy to play, especially that combat, man. The combat never got old for me. It's such a satisfying combat mechanic of doing the ATB with the command-based menu system and having your shortcuts, all of that stuff, I think just nails that experience. It's such a fun game to play. I never tire of that game's combat. I never even tire of exploration. It's such a beautiful, fun world to explore, and I can't wait to see more in Remake Part 3. Astrobot, I feel like, should get a mention here, because that game is so well crafted, from how Astro controls to all of the different gimmicks in each level to the sound design to the DualSense controller. Astrobot is the only PlayStation 5 game that makes full use of that DualSense controller from top to bottom, with how different materials feel like if you're running on a metal floor compared to like spikes or grass or sand. All of the different sound effects for your different gimmicks and the characters and the enemies and the music. So Astrobot is definitely up there for me, but I think this one's probably going to end up going to Elden Ring. And of course, we have the final category, Game of the Year. So nominated for Game of the Year, we have Astrobot, Balatro, Wu-Tang, Wukong, Elden Ring, Rebirth, and Metaphor. So first off, I want to say I don't hate Elden Ring. I used to really love FromSoft games, but I got burned out on the Souls formula and I just stopped playing. It's just, I think I've reached a point in my life where I'm getting too old to get stressed out playing a FromSoft game. They're so massively open world. There's so much to do. I get decision paralysis, so I just stopped playing them. So I understand Elden Ring is a phenomenal game. It sold like 80 million gajillion copies. It won Game of the Year at Jeff Keighley's event in 2022. And I know that Shadow of the Erd Tree is a phenomenal DLC. I'm not taking anything away from FromSoft or that DLC. My issue again, I don't think DLC should be eligible for Game of the Year. It's not technically a new game, it's an expansion, a new piece of content for a pre-existing game. You need Elden Ring to experience Shadow of the Erd Tree. So it being nominated doesn't really feel fair to the other games in this category. Now, what do I think will happen now that Erd Tree is nominated? I think there's two scenarios here. One, it wins because the voting body that decides the nominations and the awards, it's not Jeff Keighley, it's not the Game Awards, it's the game journalists. And like I mentioned before, there is a hive mind there. And if there's one thing those journalists love, it is FromSoft games. And if you look at Metacritic score, Erd Tree is the highest scoring piece of game content this year. I think it's got like a 96 or a 97 on Metacritic, which weighs pretty heavily on these decisions. So either Elden Ring is just going to take it straight up, or there might be some conflict within the voting body with those game journalists where some people are like, I don't really feel comfortable voting for a piece of DLC to win Game of the Year, so they don't vote for Elden Ring. The other people who are totally fine with it will vote for Elden Ring, which could create a bit of a split with those votes, which could allow a game like a Rebirth, a Wukong, a Metaphor, an Astrobot, a Balatro to just kind of swoop in and win Game of the Year. It's not out of the realm of possibility. That's a little less likely to happen, but it's a possibility. And going into this event before the rule change, I was pretty confident that Rebirth had a solid chance at winning. It's a game that the critics genuinely really loved. When Rebirth came out, the game journalists who played it loved it. It's got a 92 on Metacritic, 110 perfect review scores. The game journalists absolutely loved it. So it did have a decent shot at winning until, Elden Ring kind of walked into the picture. So this whole rule change really kind of throws a wrench in the entire award show, because any category that Elden Ring is in, it could genuinely just flat out win. The game critics love it so much. But for me, we all know what my game of the year is. It is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So just to give you guys a quick rundown of my top 4 games of the year, we got Tekken 8 at number 4, which was also nominated for Best Multiplayer and Best Fighting Game. Absolutely love the Tekken franchise. Tekken 8 is one of the best Tekkens out there. It plays so well, great online play, fantastic music, a genuinely fun, hokey, filled with heart story mode that is short and sweet. Great cast of characters. If you're looking to get into a fighting game, try Tekken 8. You will not be disappointed. It is phenomenal. Number 3, Astrobot, one of the best, most fun platformers I've played in a very long time. Also one of the best 3D platformers to come from a company that is not Nintendo. That is a pretty big deal. I loved all of the levels. I loved the gimmicks. I loved how it utilizes the DualSense controller to make everything feel fun and fresh and new. It's got a beautiful, vibrant soundtrack that matches every single environment, whether it's a beach area or a spooky castle area. Astro plays so well. If you like 3D platformers and you haven't tried Astrobot, give it a shot. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Number 2, Silent Hill 2. What an incredible experience from beginning to end, learning about that story, learning about the town of Silent Hill and how it warps people, how people view it. The mental health struggles that these characters go through is some pretty harrowing stuff. And for a video game to portray that type of material and do it really well and in a way that is, I guess respectful would be the proper choice here, to people who struggle with mental health or trauma or abuse, I think it was so well done. The combat, while super simple, was incredibly addictive. You know, I found myself sticking with melee weapons because I love melee combat. My brain just clicks with it. So in every single situation, I used melee weapons and only used my guns as a last resort. And once you memorize the patterns of these enemies, you can learn how to fight them and dodge them, no problem. So by the time I got to the end of the game, I had, no joke, 50 plus nutritional drinks and like 7 syringes in my inventory because I didn't really take a lot of damage. So combat, while super easy, pretty fun. The puzzles, again, range from, well, this is pretty simple, to I'm a fucking idiot and I need help, to being right in the middle, that Goldilocks zone of, oh, I just need to think about this for a few minutes and scan my environment, and I think I got it. And once you get it, you feel like Bill Nye the Science Guy. Incredible music, a spooky atmosphere that just so perfectly represents survival horror, psychological horror, the fog in that town, down to the monster designs and what they represent to James. There are so many layers to this game. Phenomenal game. If Rebirth hadn't come out this year, Silent Hill 2 would be my game of the year, hands down. But my game of the year, it's Rebirth, baby. Everything I look for in a fantastic video game, Rebirth nails. From the writing is so good in this franchise. Nojima-san just clearly understands what to do with these characters and what made them so special in the original game. A soundtrack that from top to bottom has banger after banger, songs that will make you cry, songs that will hype you up, songs that will make you laugh and kind of question, like, what am I listening to right now? Exploration, which sure has its issues, but for the most part is pretty fun, and I'm pretty sure it'll improve in Remake Part 3. Again, that combat never got old. Swapping from character to character in the heat of battle, doing really awesome synergy attacks. Again, I didn't even mention synergy stuff, but the fact that they added a story mechanic of these characters and their bonds and getting closer together and transformed it into a gameplay mechanic with the synergy stuff, the skills and the synergy abilities. Beautiful work. That's cohesion right there, man, of blending the story with the gameplay in a way that makes sense with those synergy attacks. It's gorgeous. I have a Pro. I'm playing this game a second time on a Pro, and I'm noticing so much more detail in the characters, in the environments, and the particle effects. It's a gorgeous game. It's got its issues with textures, but you know, that's an Unreal Engine problem, and hopefully they can fix that for Part 3. The overall just feel of the game, for the most part, feels really, really good from beginning to end. I had a blast playing through it. I'm not a fan of all of the mini games, but some of them were pretty fun. Everything I look for in a fantastic video game, Rebirth just checks all of those boxes and fires on all cylinders for me from beginning to end. And by the end of that game, that ending left me wanting more right away. And we gotta wait, baby. We gotta wait until 2027 for the conclusion to this story. And it's gonna be a very long wait. But again, Rebirth just is a phenomenal game. I can't recommend it enough. It is my personal game of the year. I think it truly is a very special game. Now, if you guys will allow me to step on my soapbox, at the end of the day, does any of this really matter? Does Game of the Year really matter? Does the award show really matter? Not really. It can be a fun event to talk about, but I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in Game of the Year discussions that people take it so seriously that they get really mad. If their game is not nominated, or it's nominated and it doesn't win, they fly off the handles, they get really upset. They go down all these weird conspiracy theory kind of paths trying to figure out, you know, like what's going on here. There's agendas being pushed, and I'm just not a big fan of that side of the internet. You know, at the end of the day, it's not really that deep, I guess. But here's what I'll say to kind of, you know, maybe calm people down. At the end of the day, Whether or not the game that you picked as Game of the Year won or was even nominated doesn't really matter. If you found a game this year, whether it was Wukong or Stellar Blade or Metaphor or Silent Hill or for me, Rebirth, and it just checked every box off for you in terms of what makes an amazing video game, that is what matters. Your game not being nominated or not winning does not negate the experience you had playing that game. The 116 plus hours I put into Rebirth don't suddenly evaporate just because it doesn't win Game of the Year. And you know what I'm gonna do if Rebirth doesn't win Game of the Year? I'm gonna sit my butt down on my couch and I'm gonna play more Rebirth because I love it that much. So at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter, you know? What the awards show is really meant for is exposure, and that's exposure on two fronts. One, what's the main reason people sit down and watch the Game Awards? It's for the reveals. We want to see the world premieres. We want to see what games get updates, what games get sequels, what games get shadow dropped. That is why people watch. It's essentially one big commercial. It's the E3 at the end of the year. People get so excited for that stuff and we do predictions based on it. The other aspect of exposure is just having a game involved in the Game Awards, whether it's nominated or gets mentioned, is really good for said game. Millions of people watch this event every single year, which means millions of eyes on all of these games, which really just helps boost the profile of every single one of these games. Rebirth in particular, there's a lot of people that didn't even know Rebirth was out because the marketing was not great for this game. So you could have somebody watching this event and be like, oh, I liked Remake. I didn't know Rebirth was a thing. I'll check it out. Or maybe there were some people who were on the fence about playing Rebirth and they see it got nominated for all of these different nominations, which could convince them to be like, okay, maybe I'll check it out. So at the end of the day, whatever your game of the year is, that's really what matters most. That game is always going to be special to you and it has such a profound effect on you that it was your game of the year and you were willing to fight for it, man. So that's really what matters at the end of the day. Now, would I like Rebirth to win Game of the Year? Yeah, but we can't all have things that we want. Obviously, Elden Ring is going to take this, but again, Rebirth just being in the picture, it helps with the profile of that game so much. So I'm off of my soapbox. I've dropped a few inches. With that being said, that is the video. It's a long one. I knew this was going to be a longer discussion for me. I apologize for the length, but I would encourage you guys, to just like down below in the comments, I really would love to hear like what your predictions are for the event, what games you're hoping show up. And you could let me know what your personal game of the year is. With that being said, please be kind. Again, a lot of people take this discussion very seriously and they can kind of get vitriolic with it. And I'm not a big fan of that. So just like be kind to people, leave your thoughts down below, have like fun discussions. Because at the end of the day, we're here to talk about video games and have fun. And that's the whole point of all this stuff, So I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.